now college administrators bracing for a violent 2018. And they're blaming Trump supporters. Here now to weigh in, media director for campusreform.org and former digital director for Senator Marco Rubio's presidential campaign, Cabot Phillips. Mr. Phillips, good to see you as always. So what's going on?
The left has a special talent for blaming everything on President Trump. We know this. We see it every day. And now they're finding ways to blame the rise of these violent anti-fascist protesters, rioters on President Trump. Let's be honest here. The victims here are President Trump and his supporters, and the victim is free speech, ultimately. And too many administrators, college professors on campus, they're afraid to shut down these rioters, these protesters, because they don't want to be called intolerant by their fellow leftists. And so now, essentially, they're allowing free speech to be held hostage, where this coming year, they're admitting we feel conflicted between free speech but the safety of our students. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. You can have free speech and also defend the safety of your campus.
It seems to me like Antifa and a lot of other groups are sort of immune from punishment, sanction, immune from almost anything. Why is that?
It's because the violence, when it's committed against the right, is viewed as not acceptable, but also justifiable. One of their tactics is labeling everyone they disagree with as a Nazi. And they say, well, violence is acceptable against Nazis, so if they get everyone to agree, those people who support Trump, they're Nazis, violence is now acceptable against a whole swath of American people just because they disagreed with. And you bring up a good point about accountability. There is very little accountability, especially on college campuses where law enforcement doesn't get involved. It's the administration that take care of these investigations. They throw a few, paperwork around, and then by the end of the day, no one actually gets in trouble, so they have no reason to change their tactics.
How do you suggest colleges and universities respond to what they fear coming up in 2018?
I think much of it starts with education, making sure people realize the importance of free speech, specifically on college campuses, and why it's so important to defend free debate, free discussion. And we've also covered at the Leadership Institute's Campus Reform how many students who are members of these Antifa groups don't actually know what they're protesting. Right. I was covering an Antifa protest at a speech down in Florida, and I asked the people, you're anti-fascist, can you define fascism for me? 9 out of 10 of the people I talked to had no idea what fascism was. They just saw it as an outlet for them to get their anger out and shut down people on the right.
Yeah, we've seen those clips in the news where they basically give President Trump's tax plan but say this is Bernie Sanders' idea, and they're like, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. We have to do it. And it's the exact same policy the president wants, just they put a wrong label on it. I want to sort of ask you this question, because I actually haven't had a chance to sit down with you yet and interview you. When did this start happening? Because I don't like to think of myself as old man River over here, but this was not the college that I went to. We had many, many sides and a lot of debate, but it was all civil. When did we get here?
This doesn't happen overnight. Really, for years now, the left has been stacking academia with leftists and people who agree with their agenda, and so it's begun to be a more gradual process where professors know now that they can use the classroom as sort of an indoctrination pulpit where they can get their views out there, not be as conservative teaching, because they know that around them in administration, academia, they agree with their views. And so there's not going to be anyone who's going to clamp down and say, hey, you can't just teach your opinions, you got to teach the facts. And so it's been a gradual process. Our group, Campus Reform, is trying to expose the bias that goes on college campuses and make sure that taxpayer money is not being misused for indoctrination, and also make sure that professors are being held accountable by what they're saying in the classroom to the point where they're actually giving both sides of a discussion. Let students make up their own minds. Don't have these indoctrination factories where students come out thinking there's only one side to an issue, and they go into college impressionable and they come out thinking that leftist point of view is the only one they can have.
It's a shame. I had a professor, Dick Winters, who was so left. He wrote a treatise on welfare reform. Nobody in the class knew that he was a liberal because he was so fair and balanced. He should have worked here. He's a great man.